Hi, and welcome to Lecture 2 in Module 2 for the social impact of technology. What we're going to do now, in a much shorter video, I promise, is talk about how it is that you can evaluate social impacts of technology. So, for this module, we've talked a lot about the control and shaping of technology. And now we're going to start to put that together with an evaluative model and tool that we can use throughout the rest of the course. So I want you to pop on over to the notebook, and you're going to be starting with the Think Stop here. And you are going to be considering what it is that you do right now to evaluate whether a particular technology is positive or a negative for society. You're going to maybe write out or let us know if there are any specific traits or characteristics that you look for as you consider these impacts. And as you describe your method, don't worry too much whether it's too simplistic or not sophisticated enough or not the right way of doing things. There really isn't. What's really interesting about this exercise is how similar we go about the tack of trying to find ways of evaluating technology. So how about you pause this video here, pop on over to the notebook, and write your responses in the comment box. So I got us started here. And I look forward to reading yours very soon. So when you're done this, come on back and we'll chat a little bit more. Welcome back. So I hope you found it a little interesting to think about how it is that you evaluate technology. All of us have some very, at times, strong opinions about whether or not a particular piece of technology was positive or negative. So it's an interesting thought experiment to dig in a little deeper and see what it is that we do when we make those kinds of judgments. What we're going to do now is break down the model. Well, actually, we are building to the model that you are going to be using in this course. So when we're talking about the social impacts of technology, we need to key into the idea that we are looking at things in the social realm. But what exactly does that mean? Well, social scientists call these social contingents. And when we're talking about the social world of human beings, what we are doing is talking about some very particular traits. So the social can refer to things about the self and the individual and individual identity, as we'll talk about in just on the next slide. But other contingents are the political realm, the economic realm, and the environmental realm. All of these things together sort of inform how it is that we are social beings. So let's take a look at this in a little more detail. So as I just mentioned, in the scope of what is considered social, in the category of social things, we're talking about characteristics like family, social and community structures, social class, identity. So here it could be personal identity, ethnic identity, or religious identity. But it can also pertain to our geographic identity as well. So whether we are an urban dweller, rural, it can be hard geographic measurements like, are we in the mountains or in the valleys? Are we coastal people? So all of these things sort of go into what creates a social identity for a human being. Now, when we pair that understanding with social contingents that were mentioned previously. This is sort of what it looks like. So, of course, all of these social elements like family and identity play a primary role, but so does our political realm. So this can pertain to everything from government structure, the kinds of relationships between citizens and government, the monopoly of power, so who has the power of violence within a state, or who has access to certain kinds of technologies, which is a form of power, and that can be monopolized by different political structures. Who gets to make the policies, how far or to what extent is there a rule of law, the kinds of punishment that a state dishes out for transgressions against social norms, geopolitics, and as well as foreign relations. The next area that shapes our social world and is considered a social contingent is the realm of economics. And this shapes our structures of wealth distribution within a society, how it is that the population is taxed, so it's a taxation structure, domestic economic structure, so what format is the economic structure within a state. It can also refer to interstate economic structure, so regional or even the kinds of economic relationships through trade partnerships across the world. It could also pertain to incentivizing and de-incentivizing actions. So really what we're talking about here is how people are motivated to act or not motivated and limited. And of course, how businesses can function and flourish within a society. The final contingent that we're going to be thinking a great deal about in this course is, of course, the environmental. And here, examples such as climate justice, air, land, and water rights, animal rights and welfare for animals, conservation, as well as food security are all considered parts of the environmental contingent. So taken together, you can see how all of these pieces, and I'm going to pop back here, kind of fit together to create a social world. And when the social constructivists are talking about, the social part of social construction, they are referring to all of these things together. So it is a really complicated kind of web of interconnections that go into making the social being and having a social experience. So it's really cool and a bit complicated, but that's okay. We've got lots of time this semester to delve in a little deeper and discover more and more about these areas. So now I want to show you the most useful tool in this class, and a huge shout out goes to my husband, who brainstormed this absolute elegant piece of theoretical machinery for us. So we're just going to call it the social impact evaluation model. And what it is here to do is to help guide us in creating basically a tool that we can use so that we can evaluate the social impacts of particular technologies. So I can walk you through a little bit of it. So here we have social needs, and we're going to break this down into more detail. But social needs are kind of the why something is invented. What is It looks at what is missing in the society or in the community where the technology is being developed, and what is missing and why is that particular technology being made and implemented. The second part is looking at all of the inventions that had to go in to creating that particular technology. So here we consider sort of the systems approach to defining technology. So if you remember back into last module where we thought about technology as a series of systems that interact and organize humanity, this is where that idea comes into play. And here you essentially are going to be thinking about all of the different inventions that needed to be in place within that system to create that particular technology. So we've got social needs plus the inventions, which yields the social impacts. And you can further divide these into things that were positive and things that are negative. But before we move on to an example, I want us to take a closer look here at impacts, because what is meant by impact also contains kind of two intentions. There are consequences of the impacts that are completely intended, right? The intended purpose for designing and creating the technology is there. There are, of course, unintended consequences, and these are things that are unplanned uses and consequences that were not foreseen by the creators of that technology. So it gets a bit more rich once you start considering which things were intended and which things were not intended, or which consequences were not intended, I should say, to be precise here. So let's try looking at one. So here I have the lovely model in the center, and we are going to be looking at the invention and innovation of the automobile. So we all have had experience in a car, driving it, being a passenger in it, marveling at the beauty of a car, or marveling at how ugly it can be. That's something to be seen as well. But in order to get at the impacts and the consequences of a technology, the best thing to do is, using this model, is to unpack it. So in our example, the automobile fulfills some very specific social needs, and things like it replaced horsepower transportation. So the automobile was built at a time there was steam-powered train, but for shorter distances and distances between communities, it was unfeasible to take a train. So horses and horse and carriages were the way to go. There wasn't just popping in your car. So the car was invented to satisfy the social need to replace horsepower. Because if any of you have ever dealt with horses, they have good days and bad days. They have days where they listen, days where they're not listening at all. It takes an immense amount of training and time and patience to train a horse to be able to do what you want it to do. So the automobile is there to save in horsepower. Oh, look at that. That is spelled incorrectly. I dislike spelling errors. Oh wait, no, sorry. It isn't spelled incorrectly. I'm just very tired. So let's moving on and forgetting that little blip. Another social need is the ability to travel more quickly. from place to place. So an automobile does that beautifully. Even though the early ones were not very quick at all, it was still better than walking and better than dealing with a horse. Another thing that that the automobile could replace or add to the social needs was that it was able to travel long distance fairly efficiently and with a greater deal of autonomy. So you wouldn't have to rely on a train schedule or the weather. You could just get in a car and drive there. There was also a lot of concern about how to connect communities and how to bring people and goods from one community to another. There was a real drive to connect cities and towns and villages. So the automobile was one very efficient way to do that. And likewise, connecting communities, it was also a way to distribute goods and services. So taken together, you can see that the automobile really ends up satisfying these social needs quite nicely. In our section about inventions, wow, there are so many inventions. I'm sure I have not even captured remotely the amount of ingenuity and interesting things that have been created to be put in a car and make it run efficiently and beautifully. But we can consider things like rubber tires, the gas engine. In order to have the gas engine, there needs to be a way to extract oil and gas and refine it so that it could be used in vehicles. So that had to be invented and developed to a state where it is efficient and effective. Things like headlights were pretty radical. When the sun went down, before outdoor lighting was really a popular thing, things are really dark. So a great deal of technological advancements in the realm of personal illumination was needed in order for the automobile to be able to be operated at night and operated safely. Other inventions that needed to be in place in the system of producing automobiles, of course, the assembly line. Being able to create bits and pieces of large automobiles in one plant or in one region needed to be figured out and developed. And now we're at a stage in automotive manufacturing where bits and pieces could be made all over a very large region or even shipped across the sea in order to be finished on the other side of the world and created into a car for consumption. So that was a fairly innovative invention that needed to be considered and developed. Of course, driving a car is very unpleasant unless there is something to drive on. So the development of road paving technologies and all of the planning involved in making a road and ensuring that it is effective, safe, and connecting pertinent communities together. So that's another invention. And to build onto that, expressway bridges, the ability of bridges to be built over top of bridges so that traffic can be directed away or towards other arterial roads is an amazing design feature of city planning that stemmed because of the development of the automobile. So you can see here that these two pieces together bring us a great deal of insight into the impacts of this technology of the automobile. And on this side, we have our positive and negative impacts. So some of the positive things, well, it certainly connected people. You could drive across the country to go see Grandma and Grandpa, and you can put them on a bus, you can drive them in a car. There's all sorts of positive benefits from being able to connect people. And remember too that this was an intended consequence. So that is nice to see that the reason why the car was created, it actually has come manifest for us. The development of, the movement of goods and services certainly matches as an intended consequences. Just the sheer freedom of being able to get where you would like to go on your own time is a very positive impact, and one that, although was not made explicit in the social needs, it is a consequence of the intended need to be satisfied. So we have freedom here. I think an unintended but entirely good consequence it was the development of butt warming seats in cars. I don't know how we lived our life, especially in this part of Canada, without the ability to warm our bums. That is a good thing. And if you haven't had a chance to sit in a car that has bottom warming seats, you're missing out. You haven't lived. Moving on to the bad consequences. Well, because of the popularity of the automobile and the design of the automobile is something that uses fossil fuels and creates rather large amounts of emissions of those fossil fuels in a different form, we do have the consequence of global warming. And we are now seeing its impact in all sorts of really unfortunate ways. So certainly that was not an intended consequence of the development of the vehicle, but it is certainly a consequence of it. Likewise, air pollution, fatal accidents is another example. Certainly not an intended feature of the automobile. It is a unintended consequence of it. The development of suburbs, seeing that lots of people have cars and are getting around spaces more and more. Suburbs were developed as a way to allow people to drive into city centers where they likely worked or lived part of their life. So the need to connect the city center with the suburb was a necessity, and some would argue is a bad consequence of the lifestyle from the automobile. Another bad consequence, likely unforeseen by car designers, I would think, are the millions and millions of dollars given by governments to failing automotive manufacturing firms. Taxpayers pay a great deal of their personal income, which is then distributed in all sorts of ways, not at least being given in corporate bailouts to manufacturing firms who, some of them come by hard times quite honestly, some of them not so honestly. I think GM has had some recent difficulties because they have not developed their cars in a way that consumers want to buy them. So they kept making vehicles that are not fuel efficient, that are just plain out not very well designed, and the consequence is people don't want them. The larger consequence is that in order to keep thousands of workers employed by GM, governments felt the need to have to bail out these firms. So that can be sort of part of our thinking about the negative consequences and an unforeseen consequence of the automobile. So you can see here what happens from such a simple model. What it allows you to do is unfold all sorts of facets of a technology and give you access to seeing kind of the insights that are there, which help you make more informed arguments about the social impact of that technology. So you can pause here in just a moment. I've included a case study in our notebook that you could take a look at on the air conditioner and how the air conditioner made modern America. And it's a really interesting article that, to be honest, before having read it, I never thought of the modern air conditioning in that way. So I hope that you take a chance to read it and answer some of these questions. We've all been in and around air conditioning. We all know its lovely chilly embrace on a hot day. But probably like me, you haven't had a chance to think too deeply about it. So there's some questions that you can answer in the comment box here after having read this little piece and considered what you think are some of its positive and negative impacts. And you can share those insights here. All right, so pause now, and when you come back, I'll explain the final little exercise that I have for you for this module. Hi, welcome back, lovelies. So our final little piece for this module is you giving this model a try. So I have here a list of inventions. You're going to select one, and you're going to boogie on over to our notebook, and in the space here you are going to have your turn using the model that we just learned about and one of these inventions, and you are going to give it your analysis. You're going to follow the list. You're going to make a list of the social needs, the inventions that come from it, and then the positive, negative impacts. And extra bonus props to you if you can indicate whether you think it's an intended or an unintended consequence. So you can pop your answers just down here in the comment box. And that is it for this time around. We've covered a great number of topics as to how technology is shaped and controlled and what this means for how we evaluate the impacts of technologies in society. And when you kind of take everything that we've been talking about together, you're going to have some pretty heavy-duty awesome tools and methods for the rest of the course. Because what's going to happen from here on in is that using this model and thinking in this particular way will become old hat for you. You will be able to point out to somebody very astutely that something is very technologically deterministic, or be able to use some of the keywords that we have learned in the past 2 modules. So this is the super kind of theory heavy lifting part before the real fun of this class begins, where we get to think about all sorts of effects and impacts of technology in most areas of human life. I can't say entirely all of it, but a good chunk of it. So that's it for this week. I just want to remind you again that your seminar outline, which is worth 15%, is due Friday, October 9th, so the end of week 4. So I wish you a really great day. I hope you have enjoyed learning more about how to evaluate the social impact of technology. I hope that you like practicing it, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with in our notebooks. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you'd like me to clarify something, please don't hesitate to write to me. I'm so happy to help you. Alrighty, have a great day. Prof. Yolanda out.